Hello Year 5 and welcome back to your first maths lesson. I hope you had a lovely Easter. Okay, today we're going to be looking at thousandths. When I mark your work, some of you are getting confused because last time we looked at hundredths and getting yourselves confused with hundreds and hundredths. So have a look at this place value grid. So this part of our place value grid we use for decimals. We've got our tenths, hundredths and thousandths. Anything less than one whole would go here. And anything more, then we've looked at these numbers before. It says units, but we call them ones, tens, hundreds, thousands here. So just be really careful with the ths at the end. So for example, if I put in this number, it says 4,072.41. So I can see there are no hundreds in this number, but there's 1/100th. Just be careful with that little thing. Okay, let's have a look more at hundredths. Okay, so here I've got a 100 square. And remember last lesson we looked at the fact that this 100 square was representing one whole. So here, if I count them up, I can see that I've got 22 parts shaded, and altogether there are 100 parts. So my fraction is 22 hundredths. Let's have a look at what this would be as a decimal. And here we can see we've got 2 tens, our 20, and there is our 2. So here we've got 0 ones, because we haven't got one whole 100 square coloured in. Decimal point, 2 tenths and 2 hundredths. So 22 hundredths as a decimal is 0.22. Let's have a look at another example. Okay, so this example then, we can see that I've got 2 completely coloured in 100 squares there. So that would be as a fraction 2 wholes, which would be like this, the bigger number at the beginning. And then we can see here, remember each line going down is called a column. That would be a tenth, and each row, if it's full, will be a tenth too. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows that are completely full. So that would be 2 wholes and 6 tenths. Or you could say 2 wholes, and if I counted them all up, I would have 60 hundredths. A few people, when you were putting this as an improper fraction, were doing something like this. So you'd put the 260, that would be right, and then you'd put it over 300. But remember, don't forget that each of the parts here is worth 100 if I counted them all up. So as an improper fraction, it needs to be hundredths, because each of these squares, count them all up, would be hundreds. And remember, it's improper, so it's okay that the numerator is larger than the denominator. So let's have a look now at thousandths. And here is a thousandths grid. So just like we had 100 squares, we can still see the 100 squares in there. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are the bigger squares down, and 10 across. But each of the squares from the 100 square has been split into 10 equal parts, because 100 times 10 is 1,000, that's why. So if I were to count up each of these tiny little parts of this whole big square, I'd get 1,000. Okay, so let's have a look how we write thousandths as a fraction. Okay, so we can see here, it's very small, that I've coloured in 6 of these really little rectangles. So this means that my numerator, that's how many parts are shaded, will be 6. And then my denominator, because it's how many parts are there all together, is going to be 1,000. 10, 100, 1,000 with 3 zeros at the end. Let's have a look at what this would be as a decimal. So I've got 0 ones. If I had any ones, then all of the thousandths would be shaded, and they're not. I've got 0 tenths, no rows or columns. I've got 0 hundredths. None of those squares are shaded. And how many little rectangles have I got? I've got 6. So this fraction 6 1,000ths as a decimal is going to be 0.0006. Let's have a look at another example. Okay, so I've shaded in a few more parts this time. Here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the little rectangles. Remember, a smaller square like that is 100th. So I've got 100th there, 200ths, 300ths or 30,000ths, and then I've got 1, 2 parts there. So let's have a go at writing that. So that's 100th, another 100th, another 100th, and then 2,000ths. Okay, putting them all together, I know 1 100th is equal to 10,000ths. Just going to show you in the method that we've done at school. 1 times what equals 10? Well, it's 10. And then 100 times by 10 is 1,000. That's why. And then this grid shows us that quite clearly. Let's have a look what fraction I've got then. So I've got 300ths, which would be 30,000ths, and then I've got my 2,000ths. So I've got 32,000ths. And what would this be as a decimal? I've got 300ths, 2,000ths. I haven't got any tenths. Remember, if it was all the way across, then I'd have a tenth, but I don't, so I'm going to put 0 in that column. And then don't forget your placeholder 0 in the ones column. So 32,000ths as a decimal is going to be 0.032. Okay, so this is the part of the lesson that if we were in school, I'd ask you to get your whiteboard and whiteboard pens out and have a go. So what I'd like you to do now is just pause this video and tell me what fraction is being shown here. Remember the fraction shaded in, that's going to be your numerator. How many parts are there all together? That's going to be your denominator. And then I'd like you to write that fraction as a decimal. So pause your video now, and then we're going to look at the answer in just a moment. Press play when you're ready. Okay, so let's have a look then. So I've got here 100ths. So I've got 10 of the thousandths. So 100th for that square, 200ths, 300ths, 400ths, 500ths, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 thousandths. So my numerator is going to be 54 thousandths. So my denominator has to be 1,000 because there are 1,000 parts altogether. This as a decimal, well, let's have a look. So we've got 500ths, 4 thousandths. We haven't got any tenths because we haven't got a whole row or column shaded in. And placeholder 0, make sure you put it in. So 54 thousandths as a decimal is going to be 0.054. Okay, let's have a look at an example. I'm going to ask you to do one more again on your own. Okay, so we can see from this 1,000th square that I've got a lot more colours in this time. So I've got a whole row across. Remember, one whole row is equal to a tenth. So I've got 3 whole rows. Let's write the fraction in. So I've got 1/10 here, 1/10 there, 1/10 there. And then over here, I've got a whole square. So that's 100th. 100th, and then here I've got 2 shaded in, 2 little rectangles. Remember, those little rectangles are equal to thousandths, so I've got 2 thousandths there. Okay, we're going to put this all as thousandths now, because remember, when you add fractions all together, the denominator has to be the same. So 1,000 parts all together. 1/10, so we just did this now. a hundredth was equal to 10 thousandths. So a tenth is going to be equal to how many thousandths? Let's have a look. So 10 times by 100 is 1,000. So I'll do the same for the numerator, times it by 100. So 1/10 is equal to 100 thousandths. So that means I've got a tenth here, so that's 100, 200, 300 thousandths there. And if you were to count up all these little rectangles, you would get 300, but we're going to use our fractions tab because it's quicker. And then I need to go over here, and I know 100ths is equal to 10. So I've got 300 there, 310, and two more, 312 thousandths. Let's have a look what that's going to be as a decimal. So like we said here earlier, I've got 2 thousandths. So I'm going to put 2 in my thousandths column. I've got 100th. So I'm going to put 1 in my hundredths column. And then I've got 3, 1, 2, 3 tenths. So I'm going to put 3 in my tenths column. I haven't got any thousandth squares that are completely coloured in, so that'll be 0. So 312 thousandths as a decimal is going to be 0.312. Okay, so like we did before, I'd like you to write this fraction and what it would be as a decimal. So just remember that a whole row or column is equal to a tenth. A square, like the squares like this, are equal to 100th. And then one of the teeny tiny rectangles like these are equal to 1,000th. And don't forget to use your place value grid to help you. Okay, write down what is this as a fraction and as a decimal. Pause your video now and play when you're ready to find out the answer. Okay, let's have a look what we've got then. I'm actually going to work backwards this time because some of you might find it easier. So I'll do the decimal first. So I have 3 rows, so I've got 3 tenths. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 whole squares. So that'll be 700ths. And then teeny tiny rectangles, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And my placeholder 0. So my decimal's 0.376 and my fraction is 376 thousandths. So there you go. Well done if you got that correct. Okay, so your very fluency today is going to be a lot of what we've just been doing. So you'll be given a thousandth square like this. I'll shade in a fraction and I would like you to tell me what the fraction is and what it is as a decimal. And then also, I'm going to ask you to answer some questions like this, explaining, so I know that you understand what's going on, what's 1 whole as tenths and all of those sorts of things. Make sure when you submit your work that you're doing both of the pages, and reasoning and problem solving, I would like you to have a go since we're not at school and you've got all day, you don't just have 1 hour for maths. So do have a go and send it back to me, and I'm always commenting back, and I read everything that you send me. And if you need any help, just send me a little message or a little comment or a private comment. I do read them all. I'm sorry that it doesn't notify me always straight away. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day, be good, do as your parents tell you, and I will hopefully see you very soon. Goodbye.